Hey everyone, welcome to the Cutting Edge podcast where culture meets crypto. Today we have a Catalonian screenwriter, director, and producer known for the short film The Death of Don Quixote in 2018. He's a graduate of the MA Filmmaking at the London Film School and has written about cinema and interviewed film directors for Spanish magazines. Now he is here to discuss his film, Calladita, said to be one of the first European films made entirely from NFT funding. Please welcome fellow cryptopunk, Miguel Faus. Miguel, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I'm super glad to be here speaking about film and NFTs and Calladita. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. You know, we're in a couple group chats together, and one of them being a punk chat. And I want to say I don't know if it's like what the official stats are here, but how many punks have supported the funding of Calladita so far?
So far, we have 123 punk holders who have NFTs in support of the film. So yeah, it's pretty amazing support from the community.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I see you have your punk right there on your sweater. So you're representing the punk fam. I really appreciate that. I guess before we start getting into your background and stuff, let's talk about, I guess, CryptoPunks. Like why did you gravitate towards CryptoPunks? When did you gravitate towards CryptoPunks, and what's that been like regarding your NFT journey?
Yeah, of course. I bought my CryptoPunk as my first NFT ever in March 2021. And so literally, one day I was browsing Twitter and I discovered that crazy people were paying thousands of dollars for cat JPEGs. And then that led to a couple articles that went into the tech and the revolution of the culture side of things. And I read all of that and I was hooked instantly. I fell down the rabbit hole and I saw it very clearly that this was the future. As a creator and an artist myself, I've always been very aware of how mistreated artists and creators of all kinds have been by the internet for decades. And so I saw it very clearly that this was the future and that I wanted to be a part of this revolution. So literally 2 weeks later, I took most of my life savings, I put them into my CryptoPunk. And to be honest, that was kind of a very reckless or crazy financial decision. But at that time, I didn't even think of it as an investment decision. It was more like, I believe in this, I want to be a part of this, and I want to devote years of my life to this revolution. And I want to put my money where my mouth is and join the best community that I see in this ecosystem, which are the punks. Because I was hanging out in Clubhouse and everyone who I heard that made sense and that seemed like they knew what was happening were all CryptoPunks.
Right. So yeah, so before we get into your NFT, going down the NFT industry and the rabbit hole, let's talk a little bit about your background in the filmmaking industry and how you ended up here. So if you can tell us a little bit about you and your craft and all of that before finding NFTs.
Of course, yeah. So I'm from Barcelona, Spain, and I'm 29, and I've been a filmmaker since as far back as I can remember. I fell in love with cinema in my teenage years, and then I started making little short films with my friends that I wouldn't dare show anyone. And then since then, I moved to London after college to study film more seriously at the London Film School, and there I made a few short films, like more kind of serious or like more proper short films, you could say, with full crew and good equipment and all of that. And then those short films started doing pretty well in festivals, and some of them got picked up by streaming platforms as well. And then in 2020, I made my last short film, Calladita, which is the one that we're turning now into a feature film. And well, I didn't clarify this, but in all of these short films, I'm both a writer and director. And then in most of them, I've also kind of acted as a producer as well, because I studied business in college. So I have also kind of that business side that has also been helpful in the NFT space as well, I guess.
Right.
And yeah, so that's
that's definitely super interesting. You're definitely a well-rounded creator, right? In the sense that I think also like being able to mesh the finance side of things as well as the creativity side, I think definitely helps a lot, right? Because at the end of the day, and it's funny because I've been talking to more and more people in like the filmmaking industry, where budget is a huge thing, right? Like whether, if you want to reshoot something or if you want to add like a piece or whatever it is, like that eats into the budget, which eats into the margins, which eats into the profitability, right? So I do think that definitely has helped you, but then also on top of that, like it helped you understand like NFTs a little better, faster, probably because of the financialization part of it, But before we start really talking about your NFT experience and what that was like, in the interviews that you did while you were interviewing for the Spanish magazine, what
Yeah.
was like some of the best advice that you got from the people that you interviewed?
Yeah, I interviewed a lot of acclaimed directors at some of the major film festivals, and across the board, the advice that I got the most from them was to stick to your guns as a creative and as an artist, because this is a very tough industry where many stakeholders at different times in your career and at different points in the making of a film are going to try to take creative control away from you and try to nudge you in one or other direction. And it's always fine to stay open and take criticism and take notes and whatever, but you need to stay true to your own vision as an artist and let that be your guide and defend that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I can definitely relate to that with crypto and Twitter, and like a lot of times, like you're gonna have like I think especially when ideas are so bold, people are gonna think you're crazy, right? Like when I first bought my punk, uh, people thought I was like the biggest idiot on the planet, and I was questioning myself as well. So because like a lot of times, you have to have that self-confidence to be like, no, I believe in this, right? So that definitely resonates with me. How like what was the jump? How were you able to go from, I guess, working on sets to kind of directing your own project? Like what was that like? How was that break? Was it like by chance, or was it something? I assume you always had it planned because you had been active and very interested in the space from a young age. But what was that break, and how did that jump look like?
Well, it wasn't really a jump, to be honest. The way that the industry works nowadays, there's not really a ladder that you can climb
Mhm.
from being a lower level technician or creative in the industry to becoming a director. You don't graduate into becoming a director. You just proclaim yourself a director and then try to make projects in which you're the director. So like my short films, I crowdfunded them. I put them together myself, and so because I created this thing, I get to be the director. And right now with the film, it's the same. So it's kind of you don't seek not seeking permission from anyone, but rather greenlighting yourself as an artist and putting the project together yourself. So then you can lead it.
So when you say that you crowdfunded them, was that like on Kickstarter?
Yeah, Calladita, the short film that we're now turning into a feature. Yeah, that was crowdfunded via Kickstarter. We raised around $25,000 that way. So I kind of know the Web2 crowdfunding model already very
Right.
well before turning into Web3 crowdfunding.
I'm sure that must have really helped, right? Because I mean, the Kickstarter model, very similar to crowdfunding, selling like a PFP project to raise money to go build something, right? So I feel like this must have been like a great natural evolution that you understood um, innately, right? Like right when you came into the space. The So you went to school for financing for film. That is there film financing classes? Like, is that
No, so I went to school like in normal college for my bachelor to business school, nothing to
okay?
do with finance. And there it was marketing, nothing to do with film. Sorry, so it was marketing, finance, accounting, all of the works. And
Okay.
then my master's was in film, and it was already film directing. It wasn't
Okay.
anything to do with finance. So I kind of merged the two things.
Okay. All right, cool. So then, as you're walking, you're running around, you're making films, you're crowdfunding stuff with Kickstarter. How did you
Mhm.
hear about crypto? Like, what was your first
But
interaction with crypto?
I mean, I don't remember exactly my first interaction, but for years I was aware of it and I wasn't paying a lot of attention. Like I like the idea of the blockchain, I think, and I've had a Coinbase account for like maybe 10 years, and I had tiny amounts of my savings in Coinbase, like on Bitcoin and Ethereum, but that was it. I never dived deep into it until I found out NFTs. So NFTs was my real gateway to crypto, as like that was the first time I ever had a self custodial wallet.
How did you find
And
out about NFTs?
super randomly, I read a tweet about crazy people aping into JPEGs and paying thousands of dollars for cats. I guess they were crypto kitties.
Uh-huh.
And that led to the non-fungible Bible on OpenSea, which is this very in-depth, long article from 2018 that kind of explains the whole tech and the whole revolutionary aspect of digital ownership. And as soon as I read that, I was convinced. I saw very clearly that digital ownership is a huge idea that hasn't been exploited at all in the internet. And the whole internet has been built around this flaw of not having digital ownership. And that's what has made the intermediaries so powerful and the creators so powerless.
Right.
So that's what I saw the potential to change with digital ownership. And I dove headfirst.
Yeah, no, it's very funny you mentioned the OpenSea NFT Bible, because I mean I haven't read it or looked it over in a few months now, but that's one of like those canonical pieces that like I send to people where they're like, I don't know anything about NFTs. What should I read? And I just send them that. It's like, read that first, and then like let's have a conversation, right? So
Yeah.
that's really cool. So then once you found out about NFTs, you read the OpenSea NFT Bible. What? How long from there did it take you to realize where you're like, oh man, like I have the possibility of funding a project, a film, using NFTs? Like how long did it take for it to dawn on you?
It was a few months. So for my first 5 or 6 months in the space, kind of there were two parallel journeys. On the one hand, I was a filmmaker. I was working on my film Calladita. I was finishing the script, trying to fundraise it with the traditional routes of film financing in Europe, etc. And on the other hand, I was a DJ. And I was very immersed in the space. I was hanging out in Clubhouse a lot. I was DJing into any project that I found, and I was very excited and very involved in the space as well. And then at some point, actually, it was Tony Herrera, who's a fellow punk and a big OG and a hero in the space because of his generous spirit and how much he's helped a lot of people. He was the first one who kind of suggested the idea to me that NFTs were a great crowdfunding mechanism, and that I should look into merging my two passions and seeing how I could use NFTs to make my film a reality. And not only that, because I want to stress the point that from the beginning, it was not only, there's liquidity here, I can make my film thanks to NFTs. It was also, how can we revolutionize indie filmmaking by using the tech of Web3 and NFTs so that we can have a cinema that is a lot more diverse and a lot more passionate, because young filmmakers have a chance to make their films finally, thanks to the possibilities of Web3. And then we can take down gatekeepers and decentralize cinema.
Right. And so I want to touch a little bit about what you were saying with regards to you were going around, you were trying to find funding for the film through the traditional sense. How much were
Yeah.
you looking to raise at that time?
So this budget has always been around 1 million euros. So it's always been similar. But the way that film funding for indie cinema here in Spain and in Europe works is mostly with public funds. So it's a very opaque and random system where a couple public funding bodies meet once a year and hundreds of projects are presented, and then the committee selects a handful. It's around 5% that gets selected. So your chances are very slim, but also the process is very random and very opaque.
Right.
And it only happens once a year. So you're left waiting and waiting and waiting for years on end without being able to make your films, to make your art.
And was Kickstarter not an option because the amount was so large?
Yeah, I never even considered it, and I think that that's probably the reason. For that kind of amount with Kickstarter, unless you're a huge celebrity, there's really no precedent, and also it makes sense because you're asking mainly for a donation, and you need hundreds
Right.
of thousands of
Yeah.
people to donate money to you in order to make your film. So
Right.
it's pretty, yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and the reason why I asked that about the funding for the film is because, hey, I'm not sure if I spoke to you about this off camera or I was talking to another filmmaker where, I've had those conversations where, um, you as a creator and in the filmmaking industry in general, you're constrained much more by budget, right? If I'm an artist and even if I'm making a painting or something in the real world, I can sit there and I'm like, okay, I want to do this over or I want to redo this. And yeah, it's more expensive, obviously, because the cost of materials, you have to pay that. But it's not like, oh yeah, we're going like 20% over budget or whatever, right? So it's like as a director, you have to be much more on budget. You have to be much more on time. And
Yeah.
so, and at the end of the day, when you go to financing for somebody, uh, it's an investment for them, right? And so, if you're like, oh, I want to reshoot this because I didn't feel like that was the perfect scene, it could be better. They're gonna be like, all right, well, how much does it cost, right? Because
Yeah, of
that's
course.
how does that eat into my margins? And I do think that like as a creator, having that control over your craft is super important.
Yeah.
That I think that NFTs are really opening up the space for that, right? Where you're like, okay, like this is, I assume you have like a little bit left over for like extra budgeting and stuff like that, but you can go back and reshoot something and not be like, oh, how does this affect the profitability? Like just bottom line, right? Like obviously that's super important, but like what it comes down to is what does that mean for sacrificing for the actual art of the film itself?
Yeah, 100%. It's a very industrial art, and hence there are these industrial economical decisions that impact it very much throughout the whole process. And this also impacts a lot, like the meaning of empowerment via Web3 for filmmakers, and that is very different than from many other kinds of artists. Because like for visual artists, like say illustrators, NFTs have been amazing because they've meant that finally they can get paid for their work, and they don't have to take corporate commissions, and they can just make their art and get paid for it, well, and make a living. Well, depending on how famous they are, etc. But at least they can make a living out of their art. But there's never been a question of whether they can create their art or not. Their art
Right,
is almost free to create. They can just create it, and then they might sell it or they might not sell it, but they can make it.
right,
Whereas for us filmmakers, we can't even make it unless someone gives us the money to make it because it's so expensive. So the way that we use Web3 to be empowered is not now we're gonna make a living. It's now we're gonna get to make the film. That's already a huge step for us, right?
right, right. Yeah, no, that's really funny. I never thought about that, but that makes total sense, right? It's like you can't just. I mean, you could go with a camera and be like, oh, I'm gonna direct something, I'm gonna make it, but at the end of the day, you do need a budget. You need to pay people. There's, you need to get locations and all that stuff. So that
Yeah.
definitely makes a ton of sense. So I guess based on that, right? Based on your experience, what advice can you give to new filmmakers that are coming into the Web3 space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my first advice is that you need to really immerse yourself in the community before, and this goes to all founders and all builders of any kind, but filmmakers as well. It's like you can't come in here already with a project down, in your pocket and be like, I got here to Web3 because I want to launch this project. Like first, immerse yourself in the community, immerse yourself in NFT Twitter, collect a few things, get to know the communities, see where you can add value, see where you can be helpful to people, offer a helping hand, become part of our family, and then look at ways in which you can use those connections and that family in order to add value and at the same time extract value in a way that makes sense and that is organic and that is beneficial to everyone. Because
Right.
otherwise, some people just treat the space like a liquidity pool that they can stack from, and that's not going to work in the long run for sure, because people see right through that.
Right. No, that makes total sense. So you said that you had been in the space for a couple months before you even, you spoke to Tony, and I love Tony, by the way. He's such a
Yeah.
a beacon of light in the industry. The stuff that he's doing, I think is incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you were in the space for a few months. You spoke to him, and then he gave you that idea. From that talk to when you launched the NFT project for Calladita, how long was that?
Wow, it was still like 5 more months or something, because I've had to kind of fight an uphill battle because we are so early to film NFTs that none of the infrastructure exists yet. So, there's no Kickstarter that you can go to and upload your JPEGs, and then it will mint the NFTs for you and it will set the whole thing up. So I had to hire a team of developers to create that, because this is a bit more complicated than just a smart contract that means one-of-one art, or even a generative project, because the tech side is a bit more complicated because the fundraiser is structured with tiers that give different rewards, etc. So I need a whole team of devs that did everything from scratch. And then I've also had to work with a marketing agency to get the word out there, because the space is a lot more saturated than it was before, and it's super hard to get your message across all of the noise and all of the saturation and concentration of the market. And so like it's been a few months of grinding and building the project to get where we are at now. And we launched in March 2nd, and we started working on it almost full time in like August. So it's been a few months.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean that's amazing, right? And I think that is exactly what you just said, whereas you have to take time, right? It's not like come in here and be like, oh, here's what are NFTs? Okay, cool, let's sell some and then figure it out, right? You have to go in with a plan, with a big action plan, way before you come into the space, showcasing the project. So I totally get that. So like let's talk about the film itself. Can you describe the film Calladita? I have trouble saying that, Calladita, and the
It's
inspiration behind
perfectly.
it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess a good way to start is to explain the title, and that will start setting the tone a bit. Calladita means quiet, but for a woman. So a quiet girl, kind of. It's an adjective for a woman, but it's diminutive also. And so it's sometimes used in a sexist manner to say things like "Calladita estás más bonita," which means you are more beautiful when you are quiet. And this would be like a very sexist thing to say to a woman. And the reason that is the title is because it's an ironic play on the expectations of women to be quiet and passive and subjected to other to higher powers or whatever, or to others. And then the reason why this is because the film is about a domestic worker from Latin America. And of course, domestic workers are the epitome of these expectations of being quiet and being passive and submissive. And the story follows her as the protagonist. And she works for a very rich family in Spain, in the Costa Brava, during the summer. And so it's a film about class tensions and racial and social inequality within this environment. And one easy way that sometimes I use to describe the film is kind of like Roma meets Parasite. So it's in that kind of genre
Cool.
of social satire, and at the same time a character study of this character and her struggles.
Okay, cool. No, that makes total sense. I'll be honest. Every time I read Calladita, I think of the Bad Bunny song, right? But I think that's more of a function of where I live, right? In Puerto Rico, I think over the last year and a half, I've heard that song a million times. So I appreciate that the film. It seems like really cool and interesting, right? And I remember seeing the trailer and being like, oh, like this is gonna be dope, right? Like this would be really cool. Now, are you still in the fundraising part? Like, have you sold all the NFTs, or are they still open for sale?
No, we're still open for sale. So basically, the way it works is I made a short film already in 2019 that is 15 minutes and can be seen on our website. And it's the same story, but condensed into 15 minutes. Well, I mean, a similar story, but same protagonist and kind of a shorter version of the story. And that can be seen on the website. And then I've taken the short film and I've spliced it up into stills and videos. And I've created the collection of 2,400 NFTs out of the short film. And they're all unique. And they're structured into 4 tiers. And people can buy those NFTs. And they come with different levels of utility. And all of the proceeds are going straight into funding the feature version of the story, which, we're kind of 60% the way through in terms of funding. And but we're very bullish and very optimistic about closing the funding soon. And the plan is to shoot the film in September in the Costa Brava in Spain. So it's gonna be the first European movie ever to be funded this way, and it's very exciting to pioneer this new movement of Web3 cinema, and also in the future, in the near future, also to kind of be a very open pioneer in this space, in the sense that I want to onboard new filmmakers. I want to offer a helping hand to a lot of filmmakers who are already in the space, and kind of provide a model so that many indie filmmakers can do the same thing that we did and greenlight themselves with the power of JPEGs.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think a couple questions is you said there's 4 tiers. So what
Yeah,
what do the different tiers get you? Like what are the
of
levels
course.
of membership?
So the first tier is 0.18 ETH, and there are 2,300 NFTs. So it's by far the most populated, and that gives you things like access to the film before anyone else, so you can watch it before it comes out, and then access to a private Discord where we will share a very in-depth behind the scenes look at the whole process of making the film. And also, you get to put your name or your ENS in the credits of the film. So everyone who supported the film will be credited and thanked in the credits. And then that goes up to basically the highest tier, which there are only 5 of, and has been sold out already. That was 6 ETH, and that gives you an associate producer credit, and the chance to come to the set and experience the filming and hang out with the cast and crew, and come to the wrap party as well, things like that. And we're very happy that sold out pretty quickly. And also we have some amazing collectors like Stravitz, for example, who is a very OG punk, and he put like almost 55 ETH into the project. So he's a big Calladita whale, yeah, and has over 200 of our NFTs. He really believes in the project, and we're super grateful.
That's awesome. That's great to
Yeah.
hear. So what happens if you run over budget?
I mean, I guess I'll pay it for myself. There's no other chance. There's
I
definitely no. Yeah,
that was just like a question that I just had just thinking about it. But I mean,
but I've never gone over budget in any of my
okay,
short films. If
okay,
that
yeah. I
gives
mean,
you anything
that's
to
just me
mind.
just thinking. I think that's like my finance brain just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like you sell. Let's say hopefully you sell out within the next month or two. You start
hmm
filming in September. How long does the filming and edit like from September, from the second you start filming? How long do you expect that it'll be until you have a final product?
So filming will take 5 to 6 weeks, and then post production is like 2 to 3 months. So the expectations is that we will have the film ready by say February 2023,
Mhm.
and then hopefully we will be premiering at festivals around spring 2023. So we will aim for some of the top international festivals like Cannes or South by Southwest in the US, because Sundance is in January, so that's kind of out of the picture.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, the way it works is you apply to all these amazing festivals, and it's very difficult to get in. But if you're lucky, then they select you, and then that's a great platform to premiere the film and get the ball rolling on its distribution journey.
Right. And obviously you're going to have the Discord that's up and running. I assume that there's going to be like you're just going to be very interactive with the community throughout that entire process, right? Because like I feel like it's almost it's almost like when you raise the money, you go out, you're building the product. Obviously, you're making a film, so it's not going to be like, okay, like when video game, like make the video game tomorrow, which we hear a bunch in the space. Like to me, I think it's almost like a little bit of a quiet period for a little bit, but then
Yeah.
I think like the fun part starts happening once the product is finished, and you start going to the film festivals and showcasing it, right? And I think that that's where a lot of the excitement in the community will start to build.
Yes, there's definitely a quiet period, but we are gonna strive to be as little quiet as possible during that period, to kind of give a lot of updates and give the community a very good behind the scenes look at what we're doing throughout the whole process. But then, yeah, 100%. Once the film is done, there's going to be so many opportunities for the community to feel engaged and for us to share the whole process with the community. And not only that, but also kind of, I mean, I don't want to promise anything, but there's so much creative assets that we're going to be creating during the making of the film, right? Because the way I see it, I was able to create this NFT 2400 unique NFTs that we're selling right now from a short film that is 15 minutes that I made when I had never heard the word NFT before in my life. So think of everything that I'm going to be able to create and tokenize when I'm making a 2-hour film. Now that I know everything that is possible on the blockchain, right? So there's going to be so much opportunity to bring value back to our backers and to our holders. And I always say, now I work for the holders, right? So that's my main responsibility, to make an amazing film that they're going to be proud of, and to make sure that as much as possible from the value that we're creating from the film is derived back to the holders, who are our family and our backers, and I work for them.
Right. So yeah, so definitely your commitment to the community is obviously definitely very evident. I think, as a fellow punk, I'd like to think that that's probably one of the really good things about punk, is like it's like a very tight knit community. So I like seeing that with the project that you're working on, and it's evident in the launch, right, of the art collection. What is Calladita DAO? Is that just the members, the NFT holders?
That's a great question. So basically, from the beginning, I was looking at ways that we could give as much of the value of the back end of the film back to the community as possible. Because to me, it would make sense to give a chunk of the profits of the film back to the holders, because they are the investors of the project. Unfortunately, due to the current securities laws, we aren't able to do that directly. So we can't take the proceeds of the film in the box office and then just send ETH to our holders, because that would turn the NFTs into securities, and that becomes very messy. So then the solution that we found with our 3 separate teams of lawyers, because that's another thing that we had to hire, is a bunch of lawyers, because the space is very new, and we wanna tread lightly and do everything by the book and do it well, so that we can provide a model. Is this DAO solution, which is kind of an intermediary solution. So what it means is that once the film is finished, we will set up a DAO, and we will transfer 50% of the revenues from the film into this DAO. And at that point, all of our NFTs will become DAO NFTs, granting the holders a proportionate voting power over this treasury that is accrued from the revenues of the film. So, if down the line the film is very successful and the DAO accumulates a big treasury, then the DAO can vote to make a new film, either myself or other filmmakers that DAO wants to support, and we can kind of create a small decentralized studio out of Europe that can be a force in the upcoming Web3 cinema space.
Right. No, that makes total sense. I think that's really interesting and really cool. What is just because I'm not necessarily very familiar with European filmmaking, what's like the Hollywood of Europe for film?
I don't think there is one. I mean, the biggest hub for film in Europe is France, because they have by far the best system of public funding, and they produce the most, and they also support a lot of world cinema, especially from developing countries. But it's still not comparable to Hollywood in any sense of the word.
Right.
But in Europe, there are some of the most prestigious festivals, like the Cannes Film Festival, Berlin, Venice,
Right.
and those are very important for kind of indie filmmakers like myself, who kind of strive to create a more original and passion-driven filmmaking.
Right. Cool. And then I know you just touched on it a little bit, but what's your long-term vision for the IP from the film?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because one aspect of our whole project that I don't talk about enough, just because there's so many moving parts, but we also created the Calladita art collection,
Okay.
which is basically we partner with 17 artists from the space, and they will watch the short film and created one-of-one artworks that we're also selling on OpenSea, and we are splitting the proceeds between them and the budget of the film 50-50. And so it's funny because the film doesn't even exist yet, but there's already 17 derivatives from kind of established artists from the space. Some are more up and coming, some are more established. But it's really cool to see their interpretations of the film and the fact that they're already building on the IP. So to me, that kind of signals a path forward for the IP. And one of kind of my investment thesis for NFTs that for Calladita, I sometimes share with collectors, etc., is the historic value. We know that the blockchain doesn't lie and that history is very important in the NFT space. And so what you're never going to be able to take away from Calladita is that it's the second feature movie ever to be fundraised with NFTs after Julie Pacino's Keepers of the Inn, who was also here with you at the Cutting Edge, and is the first movie in Europe to ever do this. So, if people are bullish on film NFTs, this IP is gonna hold a certain level of value just because of this historical element, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I think that's probably one of the easiest investment theses for people to wrap their heads around is like, how historic is this, right? That to me is anytime I buy something, my first thought is what's the historical significance of this? So I definitely get that. To touch upon what you said about the Calladita art collection, I think that's really interesting, right? Because maybe it starts with art today, but then like, what if there's like a derivative film made off of Calladita, right? Almost like fan film, right? It's like, I think that's just super interesting, right? Because like usually, let's say, you make a film, it's a hit, it's a classic right away. They come in and there's an automatic sequel right away. And sometimes it feels forced, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, like it's just, we're trying to make more money. But I think the cool and interesting thing could be it's like allowing community members and other creators to, maybe they do their derivative work, which is their interpretation of it, or maybe they just take the story, like where the story ends, they like do a prequel or they do a sequel or whatever, right? Like a small short film. I think that there's a lot of cool and interesting ways to take that. And like as the creator of the original film, I think you can have a lot of fun with that down the road of like, maybe you don't want to make the second one, but maybe somebody has like a great idea where it's like, oh yeah, like run with that. And like, let's see how the community can kind of iterate on that together.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's gonna be super fun. And also sometimes the reason why sequels don't work is because we are forced to create a sequel that fits into the model of a feature film, and maybe the story doesn't grant 2 more hours of content, but maybe are like 3 short film sequels that are 10 minutes each is perfect. But then currently the distribution model doesn't make that profitable or desirable. But with NFTs, anything is possible, right? So maybe 3 community members decide to make 3 short films that are each 5 minutes, and then we can tokenize them and sell them as one of ones or whatever. I mean, what I most like about NFTs is that the possibilities are endless, and it's just super exciting to dream and find out what the best solution is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's funny too because we're all learning this as we're going along, right? Like I remember, when I first came into NFTs, as you start thinking about it, right? First, people are like, "Oh, it's about art," and then it's about community, and now it's like, okay, how do we keep taking it the next step, right? It's like, now for you, and this was like a big aha moment just earlier when you mentioned it was like, as a filmmaker, like you can't create something unless you have the funding for it. So like, how does this really change the paradigm for filmmakers going forward, right? And like allowing you to be like a beacon of light to your counterparts, right? Where it's like, hey, like I was able to do this successfully. This is the model I used. And it's almost like and we saw this too. This reminds me a lot of what Justin Aversano did in photo NFTs, where anybody that he recommended to me, like as they were coming into the space and he was onboarding them, it was very much like, oh, you have like Justin's cosign. Okay, then like, like how can I help you, right? Type of thing, because you're going to be like a curator, right? Like you and Julie and all the people that are really pushing the space forward in terms of how can you use NFT for funding? And then you onboard one of your friends, and then they end up onboarding one of their friends. And we just start getting like higher quality creators that are given more create they're given a bigger leash so that they can create what they want to create and not necessarily be like, well, that doesn't test well with this audience and we don't want to offend these people and let's take that out because of this, right? So I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah. I think the example of Justin is great as well. Justin is a collector of Calladita as well, and we're super grateful and honored because and apart from punks, also a few artists that I really admire in the space have collected, like Justin, but also like Claire Silver or Thank You X. So that's been amazing. But it's funny that you bring up Justin because I sometimes have used Justin's example as well to explain this historic element value thesis for Calladita. You know, I remember very well when Justin was going around selling his twin flames and grinding and hustling very well in order to sell them. And at that point, photography NFTs were still nascent, and a lot of people didn't understand it. You know, they couldn't wrap their hands around it, and it didn't make entirely sense to them. So it was a similar time to where film NFTs are today.
Right.
And you know, so if at that time you invested in the OGs of photography NFTs, then that turned out to massively well for you. And so, you know, not financial advice, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but potentially something similar could happen with the OG film projects if film NFTs become a huge trend, which we're already seeing. To be honest, there's already like 20 projects that are going to launch in the next couple of months. So we're already starting a big wave, and I hope that it continues and that it becomes massive.
Right. Yeah, no, that's going to be definitely incredible to watch. You know, when I was out in LA, it's, you know, the big studios are still wrapping their heads around it. But I do think much like everything in life, and especially in crypto and NFTs, is like the most entrepreneurial people and the ones that are like, fuck it, like, let's figure it out, right? Because like a lot of the times that's what it is, right? It's people kind of just being like, all right, I don't have all the answers and I know that, but this is what I do know and this is what I want to do. Like, let's figure it out. So I very much respect that, you know. When you're building your team, right? How have you found partners, and what do you look for as a fit for individuals that you work with?
That's a great question. I always say passion before experience. So you know, I prefer to work with someone who's super passionate and willing to learn and willing to go the extra mile than someone who has done exactly the same job before for exactly a very similar project. That I feel like sometimes people fall into that trap of whenever they're looking for someone to hire or to collaborate with, they need someone who has done exactly the same before so they can know that they can deliver, right? That, okay, you've done this exact same thing here, so just do it here for me. And that's fine, but it's very conservative. And in my opinion, I prefer someone who's truly passionate and driven than someone who is more experienced or more knowledgeable. That's like, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think that because like especially in NFTs is like if you want to stay up to date, like you're losing sleep. You know what I mean? Like to really stay up to date in everything that's happening in the space, you have to be very passionate about it. And you know, like to me, it's like you're gonna make it, right? You're gonna work your ass off to make it happen, and that's pretty much what I personally look for as well. You know, I don't want to like kind of jump the gun because I know you're still working on this, but do you have any other projects that you're working on that like, you know, that you have on tap for after Calladita, or you just focus on this for now and you have an idea but don't necessarily aren't at a point for sharing it?
I mean, I can share a bit of what I want to do next. Who knows what will happen? But I'm not actively working on that because I prefer to focus on one project at a time. Because filmmaking is very intensive and very intense, and so you know I need my full concentration on Calladita right now. But I mean, one thing is for certain is that I'm in the Web3 ecosystem and in NFTs for the long run, and I hope to be a Web3 filmmaker forever, kind of. And then beyond that, one thing that like one idea that has been running in my mind for quite a long time and that I would love for it to be my second or my third or you know one of my films in the future is a western. I'm a huge fan of the Western, especially the classic Westerns of John Ford and Howard Hawks. And I would love to do a contemporary Western in the States and work in a way that would be kind of new to me, which is kind of close to docu fiction.
Okay.
So I want to do like a very long road trip in the American West and South and find a story that is a true story that resonates with me, and find characters that can, like, kind of, we can tell their own story and
Right.
then cast them. So it's a kind of a similar way to how Chloe Zhao works, the director of Nomadland. So she finds the characters who have a very fascinating story and then casts them in their own roles to recreate what already happened to them in the past, and then films it in a way that feels like fiction. So you watch the film and you feel like it's a normal movie,
Right.
but the reality is that it's a true story that happened to these exact same people.
Oh,
I think
that's really cool. I like.
it's a
I don't
fascinating
think
process.
maybe I've seen movies like that, but I just didn't know that. I'll ping you about that offline. I'd love
Sure.
to see, like, probably watch an example of that or some point this week. You
Yeah.
know, I know I want to be cognizant of your time. Let me ask you what I mean. Besides your punk, what is your favorite NFT
That I own or that I don't own?
that you own?
That I own, I think it would be my ringer.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Dimitri's, and we're gonna also put the ringer in the film,
Oh,
and I'm
nice.
very excited about that. And yeah, I mean, yeah, super huge fan of what Snowfro built with art blocks, and especially ringers is a very iconic um, piece of generative art for me, or collection.
For sure. Yeah, I mean ringers are great. I think I stopped minting art blocks pieces. Like like my last one was right before ringers. So like I missed ringers.
Oh,
So but it is what it is. They're beautiful to look at though.
yeah.
But yeah, Miguel, thank you for taking the time. I very much appreciate all the time and explaining everything. I'm excited for what you're doing. For people in the audience that want to find out more about you and your projects, what are the best places for them to go?
So best thing is to follow me on Twitter, Miguel Faus, or come to the Discord for Calladita and ask any questions, or DM me anytime. My DMs are open. And yeah, join us in Calladita if you believe in the future of film NFTs. And you can find all the info on our website, calladita.film, or right there on the Discord or Twitter.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me, G. It was great, and also thank you for being a Calladita collector.
Mhm.
I really appreciate it, and for championing the future of Web3 cinema.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you for taking the time, and everybody listening, thank you, and we'll see you guys next week.